What if one sentence could stop pain before it even begins? What would you do if you were about to be punished unfairly and suddenly realized you had a right no one else saw? And how does identity, something often overlooked, become the very thing that changes your situation in a single moment? The crowd had just erupted again. Moments earlier, they had been silent, listening as Paul shared his story, his past, his transformation, his encounter with Jesus. But everything shifted when he spoke about being sent to the Gentiles. That one idea was too much. The shouting returned, louder than before. "Rid the earth of him," they cried. "He's not fit to live." Anger filled the air. People threw off their cloaks, flung dust into the sky, an outward expression of inner fury. It wasn't just disagreement, it was rejection, deep and emotional. The Roman commander, watching all of this unfold, realized something. He still didn't understand why the crowd was so enraged. From his perspective, this was chaos without clarity. So he gave an order. Take Paul inside, find out what's going on. And how would they do that? By force. They brought Paul into the barracks and ordered that he be examined by flogging. This wasn't a mild questioning. This was a method meant to extract truth through pain, to force answers, to break resistance. The soldiers began preparing. They stretched Paul out, bound him with straps. Everything was in place. And in that moment, it must have felt like everything was about to go from bad to worse, because Paul hadn't done anything wrong. He hadn't committed a crime. He had simply spoken. And now he was about to suffer for it. But then, something changed. Not outside, inside. Paul spoke. Not loudly, not aggressively. Just one question. Is it legal for you to flog a Roman citizen who hasn't even been found guilty? That's all it took. One sentence, and everything stopped. The centurion heard it, and immediately he reacted. Because this wasn't a small detail. This was serious. Roman law was clear. A Roman citizen could not be beaten without a proper trial. To do so was not just wrong, it was punishable. The centurion went straight to the commander. "Do you know what you're about to do?" he asked. "This man is a Roman citizen." The commander came over. Now the tone had shifted. No longer chaos, no longer assumption. Now, caution. "Tell me," he said to Paul, "are you a Roman citizen?" "Yes, I am," Paul answered. The commander paused. Because for him, Roman citizenship had been expensive. "I had to pay a lot of money for my citizenship," he said. But Paul's reply was simple. "I was born a citizen." That difference mattered deeply, because being born a Roman citizen meant full, unquestionable rights. No doubt, no debate, no shortcuts. And just like that, everything changed. The men who were about to question Paul stepped back. Immediately. The commander himself became afraid, because he had already crossed a line. He had ordered Paul to be bound. Even that was not allowed without proper process. Fear replaced authority, caution replaced force, and Paul stood there, not as a victim, but as someone whose identity had just shifted the entire situation. This moment is powerful, not because Paul escaped pain, but because he understood something others overlooked. He knew who he was, and he wasn't afraid to say it. That's the key. Because how often do we forget that? How often do we walk into situations unaware of what we carry, unaware of our value, unaware of our rights, our identity, our purpose? Paul didn't use his citizenship to elevate himself. He didn't use it to boast. He used it at the right moment, with clarity, with purpose, and it made all the difference. This wasn't manipulation. It was wisdom. There's a difference, because wisdom knows when to speak, when to act, when to stand firm. Paul could have stayed silent. He could have endured the punishment. But he didn't. Not because he was avoiding suffering, but because the situation required truth. And sometimes, speaking up is not about self-protection. It's about alignment, about recognizing what is right, and stepping into it. This moment also reveals something else, the power of identity. Not the identity others assign to you, not the labels people place on you in moments of confusion or anger, but your true identity, the one that doesn't change based on circumstance. To the crowd, Paul was a troublemaker. To the commander, he was a mystery. To the soldiers, he was just another prisoner. But in reality, he was something else entirely. A Roman citizen. A man with rights. A man with a purpose far beyond that moment. And when he spoke that truth, everything shifted. This speaks directly to us. Because many times we find ourselves in situations where we feel powerless, where others define us, where circumstances seem to control the outcome. And in those moments, we forget something important. who we are. Not just in a social sense, but in a deeper sense, because identity shapes response. If you see yourself as powerless, you act differently. If you see yourself as valuable, as called, as intentional, you respond differently. Paul didn't panic. He didn't react emotionally. He responded with clarity, because he knew who he was, and he trusted that truth. This doesn't mean every situation will resolve instantly. It doesn't mean every challenge will disappear with one sentence. But it does mean this. Understanding your identity changes how you walk through difficulty. It gives you confidence, not arrogance. Clarity, not confusion. Strength, not fear. And that's what we see here. Paul wasn't saved from every hardship. In fact, more challenges were ahead. But in this moment, something was revealed. That even in the middle of chaos, there are moments of control. Moments where truth can shift direction. Moments where one decision, one statement, one realization can change everything. The soldiers stepped back. The threat stopped. The situation paused. Not because the world suddenly became fair, but because truth had been spoken. And truth has power. Even in systems, even in authority, even in places where you feel small. This story also challenges a common idea, that faith means staying silent, that endurance means never speaking up. But Paul shows us something different. Faith includes wisdom. It includes knowing when to endure and when to speak. It includes trusting God, but also using what has been given to you. Paul didn't ignore his citizenship. He didn't hide it. He used it at the right time, in the right way. And that balance matters. Because sometimes we think being faithful means doing nothing, but often it means doing the right thing. At the right moment, with the right heart. Paul didn't act out of fear, he acted out of awareness. And that's a powerful distinction. So what does this mean for you? It means there may be situations in your life where you feel stretched, pressured, or misunderstood, where it seems like things are moving in a direction you can't control. And in those moments, the question is not just what is happening, but who am I in this situation? What truth do you carry? What identity defines you? And are you willing to speak it? Not loudly, not aggressively, but clearly. Because clarity has power. Paul didn't shout, he asked a question, and that question stopped everything. Sometimes it's not about saying more, it's about saying the right thing at the right time, and trusting that it will make a difference. This moment in Paul's journey is not just about avoiding pain. It's about understanding position, understanding identity, understanding the role you carry in a given moment, and stepping into it with confidence. Because even when everything around you feels uncertain, even when people misunderstand you, even when the situation seems unfair, there is still something you hold, something that matters, something that can shift the direction. But you have to recognize it, and you have to use it. Paul did, and everything changed. Not permanently, not completely, but enough to move the story forward. And sometimes that's all it takes. One moment, one decision, one truth spoken at the right time to open the door for what comes next. So as you reflect on this, consider your own life. Where are you staying silent when you should speak? Where are you forgetting who you are in the middle of pressure? And what would happen if you stepped into that identity with clarity and confidence? Because you may not be in a Roman barracks, you may not be facing soldiers, but you are facing moments. Moments where your response matters, moments where your awareness matters, moments where your voice matters. And the question is, what will you do with them? Thank you for watching this video. If this message spoke to you, don't forget to like, follow the channel, and share this video with someone who needs this encouragement today.